Sio, Halito. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm going to give y'all some time to come on in. So come on in. Peace to everybody in the chat. I see a couple of numbers showing up. I thank y'all for tuning in tonight. We got a presentation tonight. Oh. Here we go. Peace, peace, peace. All right, I'm going to get this started. I got the copyright disclaimer up there, just so YouTube and the haters can see. And we're going to get started. I see a couple people was in the building. So y'all can read that copyright disclaimer. Give me a second. All right. So I want to give y'all a hand of applause for joining in tonight on Southeastern TalkingStick podcast. Wado Yakoki, Shona Bitch Chi, to everybody tuning in now and those that will tune in later. All right. So if y'all been watching our social media, we're doing a new thing. Each season, we're going to have a special guest host. Well, we will promote their brand, their knowledge, their expertise, and we will give them time to shine once a month. All right, we're doing this new thing. So y'all stay tuned. We're going to be looking at, people to see who is up next. All right. So that is brought to you by Southeastern Talking Stick Podcast, myself, Christina, RRJXI Tips, and Chatupa. All right. And shout out to our current special guest host, Yamasi Brown. Seminole Brown. I keep wanting to call him Yamasi Brown, but it's Seminole Brown. Okay? So, shout out to him. All right, so y'all saw the disclaimer. Now we're going to get to the presentation. Now, y'all know they got that movie that's out. It came out early part of November, Sarah's Oil. But I hate the fact that they don't promote her Creek ancestry. Now, I was supposed to go see the movie today, but events happened. I didn't go today, but I did something better. So I'm going to share my screen here and we're going to get started. All right. Sarah Rector, Oil and Land Creek heiress. Put some respect on her name. This is Indigenous Heritage Month. So we're going to put some respect on the matriarchs, the beloved women. All right. So we're going to put some respect on Sarah Rector, on her name. All right. So this is in the background. That's like a map of the land allotment. All right. So I'm just going to show this and then we can get into it. It shortened it. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pull it up because I did a video. So it did shorten it. Who in the chat have y'all heard of Sarah Rector? If y'all heard of Sarah Rector, put a thumbs up in the chat for me. I'm just uploading it. Thank y'all for y'all patience. Because I don't know why it shortened it on me. All right. Thank y'all for y'all patience. All right. It's moving a little slow. Didn't nobody say they heard about Sarah Rector? Where my thumbs up at? If y'all heard about Sarah Rector, the Creek oil and land heiress. Y'all heard of her? Put a thumbs up in the chat for me. Anthony heard of her. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Yakoki. It just be taking all day. All right. It's moving slow. I thank y'all for your patience. This is funny. All right, StreamYard. All right. Yeah, the video is 5 minutes long. All right, I'm going to share this while we waiting. Ready to call the beat ball. I can't play the music in the background. All right. Because we ain't getting no copyright strike. No. So this is just a little preview. And then I have part of the presentation. And we're going to get into it. Thank y'all for your patience. I appreciate y'all. All right, this I can't play because we won't have no problems. I can make it bigger. Oh, Halito, Christina, Raven Red Tail Hawk Jaguar. I am at the Sunset Manor. This is the oil and land heiress, Sarah Rector of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She is the first Muskogee Creek MISNOMER Black millionaire. This is her manor. She purchased this when her and her family moved to Kansas City. All right. So check out the history of Sarah Rector. She is the first melanated Negro Indian Creek woman. She was a little girl when she got this land in Oklahoma. All right, a land allotment that was given to creeks. All right, and then they throw that misnomer freedmen on there. So this is her manor here in Kansas City. This is what she purchased. It's called Sunset Manor. All right, I'm gonna show y'all. All right. I'm in the trenches. And it's in the hood now. Show y'all from the side too. It was beautiful back in the day. This was her brick mansion in Kansas City, Missouri. This is the back. It was beautiful back in the day when she bought it. All right. That sun is hitting kind of crazy. But we're going to do a walkthrough. All right. This is the other part of Sarah Rector's Sunset Manor. Shout out to Sarah Rector. And they need to restore this. Beautiful sign. They need to make this a museum. Again, this is Sunset Manor. Sarah Rector. Her brick mansion in Kansas City, Missouri. Baby. Live from Kansas City, Missouri. It's Sarah Rector, the oil and land heiress. Creek ancestry. This is her mansion. Ciel Halito. All right, y'all. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes. We ain't wasting no time. All right. So when I was going to do this presentation, I found a site. They have a lot of details. So shout out to this site. New Santa Fe trailer, Blogspot. They did a good job. So I'm going to read from here. So I'm going to be doing a little reading today. So, all right. And they always put Black or Negro or African American when in fact she was Creek. And they throw the freedmen on there. But she was of Creek ancestry. And put some respect on her ancestry. Those that's reporting about Sarah Rector, put some respect on her ancestry, okay? Just because her people are dark-skinned Creeks, don't try to take that away from her, all right? So, all right, I'm going to get to the meat and potatoes of this. Like, this was one of the articles, the world's richest negress, all right? Yes, she was an heiress. Yes, she was a Negro Indian. All right. A 10-year-old Oklahoma negress, a Creek Indian, Sarah Rector, is the richest colored person. She's the richest indigenous person in the world, or soon will be, and will probably have to pay more in income tax than any citizen of Oklahoma, said this person, managing editor of the Timka Democrat of Muskogee, Oklahoma. So this was a headline that was captured from 1913. This was only a part of the story of Sarah Rector. All right. So, all right. So just over a century ago, headlines spilled across America and the world. Excuse me, they had misrepresentations of her. But what really happened to Sarah Rector, her money, and her family? The most important part lost in this saga is the simple fact that her family got lost within the tabloids. Tabloids worldwide that painted a picture of a poor little girl from Oklahoma who slept on a dirt floor, struck it rich, and was taken advantage of, and lived frivolously, which was a lie. All right. All right. Some statements are partly true, but the true story of Sarah should be told through her family. It was, in fact, her family that was there for her through thick and thin. And so they got this information from her family. All right, so that's her family. The Richter women who made this research and writing possible. Donna Tompkins, Deborah Brown, Rosina Graves, Diane Brown. They are the daughters of Rosa Richter, Sarah's sister. So shout out to Sarah Richter's ancestors, her family. All right, her family. Excuse me. All right, so let's get to the meat and potatoes. So they had multiple meetings, and they got this information. All right. So this is the true legacy. All right. Sarah Richter. Sarah Richter touted to be the richest Creek girl in America. In 1913, when she was just 11 years old, holds more than just wealth and finances. To tell the story the right way, in order to paint the picture of the richest Creek girl in America, we have to understand the circumstances surrounding Sarah Richter's ancestry and the family that raised her. Sarah Richter's luck hit in part because of her ancestry and the way in which land allotments for Native Americans and their freedmen, all right, they throw that in there, occurred in Oklahoma. All right, freedmen are dark skinned Indians, Negro Indians, yeah. All right. So Sarah's paternal grandparents were born into slavery. Y'all know that Negro Indians were in slavery too, and were enslaved by the Creeks in eastern Alabama. In the 1830s, history tells us the 5 civilized tribes, which included the Creek, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole tribes, were forced to leave their lands. 20,000 Creek Indians and their enslaved people were forced west. The chief of the tribe, an Alabama-born man named Opothley, I'm butchering his name, forgive me, Yehola, 1778 to 1863, was one of these leaders who enslaved people. When he moved to Indian Territory, he settled on 2,000-acre plantation near the Deep Fork River. One of his people in bondage was none other than a woman named Molly, and Molly would marry a man who was once held in slavery by Raleigh's Grayson. His name was Benjamin McQueen. All right. Chief Yehola may have owned chattel, but he wasn't willing to sacrifice it all and side with the Confederacy during the Civil War. Even as most of the Creeks opted to follow the rebels, Yehola stayed neutral during the early onset of the war. Due to the encroaching Confederate troops, many Creeks fled into Kansas and joined the 1st Indian Home Guard. Sarah's maternal grandfather, York Jackson, served alongside Creek Indians as a private. His father, Jack McGilbra, 1821 to 1891, was enslaved by the Creeks. Names in this family's history can be complicated, so bear with me. York had taken the surname Jackson in honor of being literally Jack's son. An enslaved woman held by Yehola named Molly married Benjamin McQueen and had a son named Jack Benjamin. Another example of a freedman choosing his father's first name instead of a slave master's surname. Jack Benjamin left Indian Territory long enough to enlist in Lawrence, Kansas in November of 1863. He joined the Union Army as a private in the 83rd Infantry, U.S. Colored Troops. Even after these two men, once in bondage, left the service, they returned back to Indian Territory to rejoin their family and friends. At the onset of the Civil War in 1861, the 5 civilized tribes included 10,000 enslaved men, women, and children, and they weren't freed just yet. This is what they say. Jack Benjamin, 1838 to 1915, for some reason changed his name to John Richter and married Betty Corbner, 1846. York McGilbra Jackson married Amy Manuel, 1846 to 1936. Shockingly, even though the Civil War abolished slavery across the nation, that didn't include Indian Territory. In 1866, a treaty forced Native Americans to abolish slavery and allowed Creeks and their freedmen to become United States citizens. Freedmen, or Negro Indians, such as Benjamin and Molly McQueen, Jack Benjamin, John Richter, Betty Corbner Richter, York Jackson McGilbra, and Amy McGilbra were all Negro Indian, born into slavery and eligible for land allotments. So, because she was of Creek ancestry, she got a land allotment. All right. Land allotments, according to the treaty. At this time in history, Indian territory had been reduced to 20 million acres. Each Negro Indian was given 160 acres of land, and the Creek freedmen, or the Creek Negro Indians, chose to settle together and form their own town. Originally, their settlement twined after William H. Twine, the first editor of an American newspaper in Indian Territory, who ironically rented land from John Richter. The town by 1904 became known as Taft. All right, so this town was called Taft. Sitting 8 miles west of Muskogee, Taft today is one of only 13 all Negro Indian towns still in existence in Oklahoma. At the time, it was one of the 50 settlements founded by Negro Indians, MISNOMER freedmen. All right, and this is Amy Manuel McGilbra, 1846-1936, with Joe and Rose Richter's daughter, Rosa, 1913-1992. This photo is courtesy of the Richter descendants. All right. So, sitting 8 miles west of Muskogee, Taft, the town, today is one and only 13 all Negro Indian towns still in existence in Oklahoma. At the time, it was one of the 50 settlements founded by Negro Indians. John Richter and his wife, Betty, had a son named Joseph, 1878, and York McGilbra Jackson and his wife, Amy, had a daughter named Rose, 1886. In an all Negro Indian community concentrated on farming cotton and corn, it is certain that these two families knew one another for quite a long time. Just because they were allotted 160 acres apiece didn't mean that they were resistant to poverty. It was quite the opposite. To think that these families, mostly illiterate and lacking formal education at the time, were able to build this bustling early 20th century town of Taft is inspiring. All right. According to the Oklahoma Historical Society, Taft had 2 newspapers, 3 general stores, a brickyard, a drugstore, a soda pop factory, a livery table, a grist mill, 2 hotels, a restaurant, a bank, and a funeral home, all before 1910. Joe and Rose likely attended church dances and social gatherings together for many years before they decided to take the plunge. First came their daughter, Rebecca, called Becky, in 1901, and Sarah followed on March 3rd, 1902. By 1906, a boy named Joe Jr. joined the growing family. All right. They didn't have much. The dusty streets of Taft were the center of their entire social existence. In 1907, the town's population clocked in at a whopping 250, with most of the community traveling to it from their Indian allotment lands outside of town. The growing Richter family resided in a 2-room cabin situated on Rose's allotment of land. Yes, 2 rooms are tight, but it's likely to have been the condition of most, if not all, the Negro Indians that lived in the area around Taft. Allotments were about to run out, and the Richters knew it was time to get in line for their children. Go get them allotments. That's right. The cutoff date on March 1906 only allowed their three oldest children, Becky, Sarah, and Joe Jr., to get a piece of the lands, even though they welcomed a daughter, Lou Alice, in 1907. All right. This is the allotment, the map. All right. Sarah Richter's land allotment on the Cimarron River is highlighted on Hastings Township plats of the Creek Nation, 1910. By the time they had their chance to get a hold of their land for their children, the pickings were slim. Becky's land was in Okofoskee County, and Sarah and Joe Jr. ended up with fragmented parcels of 160 acres, 50 miles northwest of Taft. The government was grabbing at undesirable deeds and didn't even adjoin one another. All right, so this is why they got fragmented land. Sarah's land was near a bend along the Cimarron River and was valued at around $500 at $3.50 an acre. She wasn't shouting, "I'm rich," just yet. Nor did anyone ever in a million years think that a Creek Negro Indian would become a millionaire. To own land, even land with the rockiest, driest soil, requires taxation. Taxes, people. Taxes always seem to play into the Richter's rise and demise. By 1909, Joe was trying to sell his three children's land holdings. The fact that they had 160 acres per child became a pretty big tax problem, especially since the land that landed in their laps was so far away. He was successful only in selling Becky's land for 1,700 in 1910, a financial windfall for the family. And it says this is a home of a Creek Negro Indian. All right. Oklahoma Territory, 1900. This is courtesy of the records of the Office of the Secretary of the Interior. But was that enough? Okay, it was just 1,700. Was that 1,700 going to support a family? They had now grown to 7 mouths to feed. It was certainly a ton of money to a family living in a 2-room cabin. There was soon a buzz within the tight-knit community of Taft. Oil, the black gold of America, was discovered in farms sprinkled across Oklahoma. It seemed that the richest soil in the area didn't necessarily hold the high dollars below ground. It could be anywhere, especially on untouched, rocky, grimy lands allotted to the Negro Indians. By 1911, Joe was desperately trying to rid himself of Sarah's land. The new promotion of leasing land to these greedy oil diggers presented a new opportunity for Richter's useless land, so many miles away from them. Joe ended up satisfied when he was able to lease Sarah's land to an oil company out of Pennsylvania. He received a bonus of $160. Just $160. They still didn't strike oil. The lease ran out and nothing happened, but things had happened on other Negro Indian lands, and the results led to nothing positive. Money can indeed create problems, all right? Oil was discovered on the other Indian allotment lands given to children. In the same year, Harold Seals, 13, and his sister, Castella, 10, struck the big time when oil was discovered on what was assumed to be useless land. In the middle of the night, dynamite was placed under their house in Taft, where the two children were sleeping. The house erupted into fiery pieces. Harold was killed instantly. His sister was trapped under the burning timbers and was not as lucky. So they was bombing the homes of the families that their land, they struck oil on their land and they was bombing their houses and killing people. They was, yeah, unaliving people. Excuse me. So these kids were unalived for an estate valued just over $50,000. All right. Several men, both misnomer black and white, were implicated in the crime, including John Manuel, likely a distant relative of the Rectors. The surname Manuel was in fact Rose's mother's maiden name. More on this connection soon. Here's an article headline in the Muskogee Daily Phoenix, April 26, 1915. Great oil fields that lie around Muskogee have made ignorant children fabulously wealthy. Sarah Rector, 13-year-old Negro girl, she was a Negro Indian, a Creek, who lived in a tent, is worth $500,000 and is getting richer every day. They was mad jealous, right? Envious. All right. It says striking oil was surely a life changer, but as the little Seal's children learned, it also brought greed and great weight on how to manage what could be millions of dollars. A year later, another lease for Sarah's land came through, but only $80. At this time, a gusher, they struck some oil, had been located about 5 miles south of Sarah's land. That's when karma kicked in. In March, when Sarah was attending school in nearby Taft, an oil driller, BB Jones, assembled the necessary equipment to check out Sarah Richter's land near the Cimarron River. Any oil produced would give a 12.5% royalty to Sarah. In late August 1913, B.B. Jones produced a gusher on the land leased from Sarah's allotment. Quickly, this oil gusher produced 2,500 barrels of oil per day. Sarah's cut per day was 300 back in the day. This was a hell of a lot of money. By this point, Sarah was the second oldest of 6 children. Her parents welcoming Alfred, Lily, and little Rosie by 1913. New siblings weren't the only thing new in Joe and Rose's life. They had a daughter who was transformed as a little Negro Indian girl from Taft into a millionaire headline overnight. Headlines such as girls 112,000 a year. Negro Indian girl will pay the largest tax. And a Negro Indian girl rich from oil has income of 475 daily. More soon. Sensationalize the story of a girl and her family's reality. When this gusher was found by B.B. Jones and on Sarah's land, the family still lived frugally in their cabin. So even though they got that money, they lived frugally in their little cabin. It wasn't uncommon for white guardians in Oklahoma to be placed by the courts in order to protect the allotments of the Negro Indians, misnomer freedmen, for whatever the reason. Joe opted to appoint Thomas Jefferson, T.J. Porter, as Sarah's guardian in July of 1913, just a few months before the gusher gushed its millions. Why T.J. Porter? Well, He was, according to the family, a trusted acquaintance. And boy, did the newspapers have a heyday with his motives. And this is a picture of Sarah Rector farm on the Cimarron River. This is a photo courtesy of the Oklahoma Historical Society. All right, so they was looking into what are his motives, all right? This may seem strange to us now, but it was a commonplace in this era to have white legal guardians taking a cut of the royalties in order to supposedly protect an estate. Guardians got on average of 2 to 6% of the profits. And in the case of TJ Porter, he got less than 2%. All right. He got less than 2%. When I asked the Richter descendants on their personal feelings about Porter, they described him as being a fair man. Well, he got, a small percentage. All right. Regardless, he was in control of all the bank rolls from Sarah's newfound wealth. In November 1913, Joe was receiving $50 per month for Sarah's care, which was a ton of money in those days. They even eventually had a 7-passenger Cadillac, a big upgrade from a horse too old to work. It was long before the accusations came pouring in from outsiders. So the Chicago Defender, they wrote, richest colored girl forced to live in a shack. Now, earlier I read they lived in their cabin trying to live frugally, right? So these headlines, they was kind of, going all the way with it. All right. So this is from November 29th, 1913 in the Chicago Defender. All right, Sarah and her siblings were perfectly content going to school in Taft, but that didn't seem to be acceptable of those outsiders looking in. Due to her newfound wealth, publications across America wrote of marriage proposals, especially those that came from 4 white men from Germany. Evidently, the color of an heiress does not matter if the color of her gold is genuine, wrote Edward Curd, Sarah's attorney. So she had an attorney. All right. He also concluded that the men that wrote her were fine looking chaps. Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, by October 13th, 11-year-old Sarah Rector received $11,567 in royalties from the gusher of oil on her land allotment. It was an article in a respectable Negro newspaper called the Chicago Defender that turned their worlds upside down. In November 1913, not aware of monthly allotments Sarah was getting, the newspaper headline read, richest colored girl, Negro Indian forced to live in a shack. I'm on live. Okay, you left the door open in the basement, man. Okay, thank you. Excuse me. All right, so claims were made that Sarah was sleeping on the floor and her guardian was only giving her a few dollars a month. The article claimed they didn't know, they didn't have inside information. The parents are so ignorant, they have no conception, whatever the amount of her income, and no inclination to assist upon a good education and befitting comforts to her. So little, Sarah easily becomes the prey of white men. That's all it took. So these newspapers was just going crazy, printing all this shit, right? So the Washington Post went on to write that Sarah had a little mental capacity. They even reduced her to say that she had little mental capacity. Excuse me. So these were all lies. These were all lies perpetuated by the media. So even back then, the media was on some bullshit. All right. All right. So the headlines didn't shake the foundation of this family, and TJ Porter had to answer to so many of these accusations. In December of 1913, Sarah received a phonograph, a piano, and they built a new 5-room home for her and her family. All right. Between the marriage proposals, the mistreatment of funds, and the idea that Sarah was not being furthered academically became a target of the public. The NAACP got involved due to the continuous reports from the Chicago Defender. W.E. Du Bois personally wrote the judge overseeing her allotments and asked that they ensure that the little Sarah, not her siblings, received the best education offered. All right, it says richest colored girl, Negro Indian, okay, forced to live in this log hut. This is another one of these fabrications. All right. So it says Booker T. Washington allegedly became so concerned about Sarah's condition, not those of the rest of the family, that he came to the area in the summer of 1914 to inspect her home. Was Sarah sleeping on a dirt floor? Was she in the condition that some had reported her to be in? That would be a no. It was reported that Sarah had still never slept in a bed, but on a pallet, and she was still living in a poorhouse on her mother's land, which was a lie. All right, the truth was that the family was in what we will call a moderate condition. They were not in dire straits. Even when the children were still attending school in Taft, the financial problems continued. By spring 1914, Sarah's allotments had given the family just over $55,000 in royalties. Just short a time later, the pressure from the NAACP and the misnomer Black leaders across America who had read her story had Sarah leaving home and headed back to where, ironically, the story began, Alabama. Sarah was enrolled in Tuskegee Institute's elementary school called the Children's Home, but she wasn't going to do it alone. Her mother insisted that her older sister, Becky, go along to ensure her younger sister was in good hands. Even after Sarah and Becky left for Alabama for better schooling, the newspapers reported that they were living in a tent. They was just on some bullshit. Sensationalized media existed even back then. After 1 year, the girls went to Fisk University's boarding school before rejoining the Rector family for Christmas break in 1916. No evidence exists that the girls returned to school in Alabama, and it's likely the family moved shortly thereafter to Kansas City. Most of Sarah's money was held up in investments across the community and in bonds. By the time she left for school, TJ Porter had arranged for her to buy over 2,000 acres of land that he then leased for a steady income. One of her bigger investments was in a 2-story building in Muskogee at 223 South 2nd Street that included the Busy Bee Cafe. The top floor was renovated and became the Busy Bee Hotel. So she had a cafe and a hotel. Sarah's family still remembers hearing stories of the Busy Bee Cafe. All right, so they show her tree. All right, Joe and Rose's children, Rebecca, Sarah, Joe Jr., Lou Alice, Alvin, Lily, Rosa, Arthur, and Roy. All right, these are Sarah Richter's siblings and her parents. All right. By the time Sarah was 18, she was worth well over $1 million, likely in order to escape scrutiny and not wanting to be the target of some greedy party's act. Sarah's family secretly slipped away and moved north to Kansas City by 1917. By 1918, Joe Richter is listed as living at 1218 Euclid in the heart of what was becoming a booming American community, a Negro community. All right. The family appears to have lived here for at least 3 years. So that's this is the house that I went to visit today, and I showed the video earlier. If you just tuning in, thank y'all for tuning in. Y'all can look at the beginning, and I may show it one more time before we close out. All right, so as fate will have it, the Richter family will further reside in Kansas City and visit their beloved home in Taft when they could. All right, so they will commute back. All right, this is the Sunset Manor. This was the brick mansion in Kansas City that they moved to. I found it interesting that her family told me that Sarah never really visited her homestead containing the gusher that made her millions of dollars. She fell on the wayside as a spectator of her own wealth in the long run. The Richters settled into the east side of Kansas City in the home Rosebach at 2000 East 12th Street, now oftentimes referred to as the Richter Mansion. All right. Even as the Richters relocated to Kansas City, there were transactions and business to attend in Oklahoma. By 1918, there were 50 oil wells on Sarah's land, and a new contract with a Kansas company resulted in $300,000 signing bonus. That's a pretty penny for in 1918. That's a lot of money. All right. Getting to the beautiful brick mansion at 2000 East 12th Street was a statement to everyone in the community. They were reformulating the boundaries of acceptance. That property had quite a bit of history that didn't involve Negro Indians, which further made the transaction monumental. They just didn't think that the mansion was lovely, but they set out to buy the whole block. All right. They bought the whole block. By 1920, the Richter family, including 18-year-old Sarah, were all living in a home previously occupied by Harry S. Ferguson, the president of the U.S. Water and Steam Supply Company. He had lived in the home for over 17 years. So right here is her mother, Mama Rose Richter, posing inside of the Richter mansion in the 1920s. This is a photo courtesy of the Richter descendants. All right, that's our mother. Respect to the matriarch. All right. The house known today inaccurately as Sarah Richter's mansion or house was actually purchased by Rose Richter for $20,000 after they leased the home for several months. At the time the house was purchased, it was said Sarah was worth $1 million. The house was known as Sunset Manor. Quickly, the entire frontage of 12th Street from Euclid to Garfield was bought with Richter's money, just as had been done while Sarah was under the guardianship of T.J. Porter. Investing money and leasing land was part of Richter's portfolio. Not every segment of the Richter's history is rosy. Even before the family's wealth, Joe had his run-ins with the law. Joe's reputation may have made Rose's parents a bit nervous when they decided to get married. In 1898, Joe was stabbed twice in Twine, once in the right shoulder and once in the left chest. The left, yeah. Although it was originally thought he would die from his injuries, he survived. In 1916, Joe was involved in a lawsuit with his mother over falsified deeds. And in 1920, there was a disagreement after a game of cards in Taft that had a gun pulled on him. Luckily, even though the gunman shot at him twice, Joe was unharmed. Even Joe's own brother, Fred, tried to get in on the money management of Sarah's land. So when you have when you worth millions, even sometimes your crazy family, everybody that's your blood, ain't really truly for you. And bystanders ain't for you either. So you gotta watch out. Okay, so even her uncle was in on trying to do money management on her land. That alone tells you how contentious and how important it was that the family move away. The Rector family came to Kansas City for a new life and to obviously avoid the misfortunes that overtook their Negro Indian families over money. In 1922, the Richters had a really big year, both good and bad. All right. Sarah wanted nothing more than to have control over her own money after years of guardianship, and even even though she had turned 18 in 1920, people still wanted their hands in the pot. Luckily, a judge named Jules E. Gwinnott, son of Kansas City pioneer Joseph Gwinnott, released her from guardianship and set her free at last. So now she was in control of her own money. And this is the Rector Mansion. All right. This was good and bad. At this time, Joe Rector allegedly received a call from an old acquaintance named Jim Manuel. Does that last name sound familiar? Remember those two little children killed by the dynamite after their allotments ended up with oil reserves on them? Jim Manuel had allegedly been involved in the dynamite explosion in Taft that killed the two children with the oil allotments. However, he was not one of the two men who were given life in prison for the heinous crime. Excuse me. All right. He also had a rap sheet that makes Joe look like a saint. So this was another headline. Sarah Rector, her own boss. Shout out to Sarah Rector. She was her own boss, and she had Indian land allotment, which is rightfully her land. She struck black gold. She struck oil on her land and made her a millionaire. So she was her own boss. Finally, the judge did give her guardianship over her own fucking money. All right. Rich Negro Indian girl takes over control of big estate from Muskogee trustees. All right. This is a headline from the Muskogee Times, Democrat in August 17th of 1920. All right, Jim Emanuel, back to this dude, this janky dude, I'm thinking. All right. Jim Manuel had a rap sheet in Oklahoma that reached back to 1895. He was labeled a notorious Negro, arrested for forgery of 5 checks, deeds, and for stealing a horse and a buggy. He was labeled a dangerous hombre. when they tried to take a gun into a jail so he could shoot officers. In 1913, he was said to have a set of gold teeth that would disguise his identity, and that he had a warrant in almost every county in Oklahoma. He was charged with enough misdemeanors to send him to the penitentiary for life. Instead, they put him in for 10 years. But that didn't last. In 1919, Jim Manuel was pardoned and then sent to St. Louis to answer for a charge of using mails to defraud. He was charged and convicted of the crime. Jim Manuel, about 40 years old, was always up to no good. Maybe Joe didn't see this for some reason, even though Jim was responsible for defrauding his own sister in Taft years before. As an inmate in the Missouri State Penitentiary, Jim allegedly contacted a Mexican lawyer he knew from prior endeavors. The lawyer then contacted the warden and claimed that Jim had lands gushing with oil worth millions of dollars. Jim was described as 60 years old, skinny as a rail, bald head, and without a natural tooth in his head. And so this is just a headline. Black Bandit King captured at last. Cleverest outlaw since days of Jesse James finally is in the tolls. All right, so after pressuring the prison warden, Jim Manuel was able to allegedly arrange a meeting at the Rector mansion in Kansas City, Missouri, with a prison guard in tow. He pleaded with Joe. Joe is Sarah Richter's daddy, stating that he couldn't get to the land worth so much money and oil without his help. He promised to give him half of the money he earned. Rose Richter definitely did not like the scenario, but as her descendants told me, Mama Rose was always including Joe in financial decisions. Rose was a hard worker and as a laundress prior to the financial windfall. She knew hard work in her day. It was said in many records that she was stingy, so she was frugal with her money. The mama was frugal with the money. The daddy, he was tripping. All right, so let's look at this. So this is a Telegraph. All right, let's see. How y'all doing in the chat? I know I'm reading a lot, but I did want to read this because they did such a thorough job, because they actually talked to Sarah Richter's, her descendants, all right, her family members, to get this story. But I appreciate y'all rocking with me. If y'all just now tuning in, this is about American Indian Heritage Month, and we are honoring Sarah Richter, a Creek Indian, a Negro Indian, who was the first millionaire because she had oil on her land, and it was land that they gave her basically the leftover land, not knowing that they was going to strike oil and she was going to become a millionaire. All right, so this janky dude, right? He talks to Sarah's daddy, all right, saying that he wants Sarah's daddy's help to help him get his money from his oil land, blah blah blah. All right. So it said, okay, the Richters certainly knew something of his criminal past, but money may have been the motivator here. Sarah Richter had given Mama Rose control of her money and her father. Joe didn't have any say. In order for Jim Manuel to show Joe Richter where the alleged 40 million oil gusher was in Mexico, he had to be free. In turn, Joe was able to talk to his wife, allegedly, talk his wife into paying his $8,000 bond plus $2,000 in expenses to go to Tampico, Mexico, and get his half. So this man promised Sarah's daddy half of his money. I think he's full of shit, but okay. This story, for the record, is quite different than the story told to me by the Rector family. Okay. They were told that Joe was working on bringing cattle back from Texas when he was shot on a train. All right, maybe. That could be true, but it is also a possibility that what the papers reported were embarrassing for the rich Richter family. So they was printing all kind of shit. All right, the truth lies likely somewhere in between these stories. All right. While on their adventure, Jim Manuel and Joe Richter arrived in Mexico on Joe's dollar, and all the money evaporated while trying to target this land in Tampico. Not too long after arriving, Jim Manuel disappeared into the sunset. All records indicate he never, under his legal name, surfaced in his homeland. This left Joe Richter all alone, broke, and with a heartache of telling Rose what happened. The newspapers reported with much sensation that he was desperate and finally wired his beloved wife at 2000 East 12th Street for the money to get home. Defeated, he sobbed all the way to Dallas, where his sorrow killed him as he traveled by train on his way back to Kansas City. What? Okay. So this is a little article that they talk about this. All right. Like Rainbow Gold, Jim's big oil well, not legal tender. When his dream bubble was punctured, Joe Richter died of humiliation. Manuel's fine yarn got him out of jail. So he basically did a hustle move. Father of immortal Sarah, made an immense fortune almost. His funeral will be held today. This was the headline in the Muskogee Times, Democrat, July 11th, 1922. Joe's death record tells a different story. It shows that from July 7th to July 8th, Joe was seen by a doctor at Baylor Hospital in Dallas. His cause of death looks like trauma, and the underlying cause was kidney disease. It was known that Joe had prior operations for health reasons. Regardless, the newspapers registered this unfortunate death as being the fault of Jim Manuel and his scheme for some of the Richter money. All right, so this death was a blow to his wife, Rose, and her children in Kansas City. So Sarah's daddy died. Mama Rose quickly arranged a train to take her beloved husband's body back to Taft in Oklahoma, where it was buried at Blackjack Cemetery in the family plot. Several stories were shared about the family's time in the Richter mansion. In the back of the stately home was a two-story carriage house with servants' quarters on the second floor. It should be no surprise that the family had hired help in the Roaring Twenties, where less than a mile down the road was the booming 18th and Vine district, the Jazz district, the hub of the Negro American social activity. All right, which is still thriving today. If you ever come to Kansas City, Missouri, this is where this mansion was, the Richter Mansion. Her mansion is not far from 18th and Vine, the Jazz District. We have the Negro Jazz Museum, and it also houses the memorabilia from Buck O'Neil and the Kansas City Monarchs. So the Negro Baseball League Museum is also there. All right. Shortly after the death of Joe, Sarah married Kenneth Campbell. All right, when she was 20 years old, and her sister Becky married as well. Cars, clothes seemed to be the favorites with the Richter women. A chauffeur was tasked with driving a series of expensive vehicles, including a Rolls Royce. All right, Sarah had her some. As she should. She had mansions, owned blocks, land, businesses, Rolls Royces. All right. When Rosa, Sarah's little sister, 1913, was forced to go to school, the cries would echo throughout the Richter home. It became a routine for her to be dressed while sleeping, put inside a Rolls Royce limo while she still slept. And the chauffeur would struggle to get her out of the car and get her butt into school. So here's Sarah Richter at her home in Wyandotte County. All right. So this is just a display of the fashion. So they just talk about, their expenses because they were millionaires uh, because of the oil that was discovered on Sarah's Indian land allotment. All right. In the 1920s, the whole family, including Sarah and her husband, Kenneth, lived in the Richter mansion. One of Mama Rose's chauffeurs was named Emery Nelson. He got himself involved in a little scheme when a vendor showed up just before Christmas in 1924 to make a sale to the Richter ladies. 2,000 worth of silk underwear and other silken wearing apparel. Value at another 500 was stolen from a car outside as the vendor was showing the ladies his new line of silks, trying to make a sale. They was trying to get money any kind of way. These people around them. But this is money can do this to people. It can make people do some crazy shit. All right, so the Richter ladies love the finer clothing, but due to the color of their skin, they were not allowed to shop alongside of the white patrons in stores along the Petticoat Lane in downtown Kansas City. Many stores, including Emery Bird, Thayer and Company, will shut their doors to the public and allow the Richter women to shop freely. So they had the store closed down so that they could go in there and shop. All right, spending freely at the most fashionable stores was commonplace for the Richters in the 1920s. In 1926, Mama Rose must have been a bit embarrassed when the exclusive Vogue shop at the hotel, I ain't even gonna butcher this name, Moula Blanc, Moula, uh, Moula Bach, was featured. All right, unusual style and exquisite designing. Claimed she wrote a bad check for $388.50. She ain't writing no bad check. She a millionaire. Anyway, so this is Sarah Richter. She was in the Kansas City Call paper after she got married. So this is Sarah Richter and her husband. So she became Sarah Richter Campbell. Her husband was Kenneth Campbell. He was focused on real estate development and his Hoop Mobile car dealership at 18th and Vine. Sarah and her mother, Rose, were known for their fancy vehicles and they raced. She liked to race. So they raced around town. In fact, both women appeared to have a bit of a lead foot. Several speeding tickets were issued to both of them, especially to Sarah. So they like to speed around in their fancy race cars. When she was pulled over in her shiny green and black Cadillac, Sarah would cockily turn to the officer and say, "Don't you know who I am?" So Sarah had 3 children, Kenneth, Leonard, and and Clarence, before her marriage, and her fiancés fell apart. The history books tell us that the stock market crash in 1929 set the stage for a national depression that destroyed a myriad number of millionaires. The Richters were no different. Extensive land holdings in Oklahoma, bonds now worth nothing, along with depleting oil royalties, marked the end of their overly lavish spending habits. It was around this time that the taxes on the Richter mansion came due. All right, taxes always seem to be their downfall. The home was sold to the Atkins Funeral Home. Sarah and her older sister Becky divorced their husbands. This is Sarah getting into her fashionable car in the 1950s. So it goes on to say that Sarah and her older sister Becky divorced their husbands and moved to much smaller homes on the east side. In 1930, Sarah was living with her sister and her maternal grandmother at 2440 Brooklyn. In 1934, she married William Crawford, the owner of Dick Down Home Cook Shop at 1521 East 18th Street. It was a favorite hangout of the Kansas City Monarchs baseball team. To be clear, Sarah still had quite a bit of money, but she didn't have the ability to throw money around like she had once. All right. So she still has some money, but it's time to be frugal now since they had the stock market crash. All right. So she still had quite a bit of money, but she didn't have the ability to throw money around like she had once before. Her siblings all took on jobs. Her mother, even from a time, went back to working as a maid. Sarah was known for her extravagant parties that are oftentimes referred to as being in the Richter Mansion on 12th Street, where she entertained musicians such as Count Basie, Duke Ellington. There's no doubt that some parties would have occurred in this beautiful home, but the real parties happened, according to her family, when she moved to her home on Lock Ridge on the east side of Kansas City. She continued to invest in real estate and owned several homes around 26 and Lockridge. She owned a sprawling farm in Wyandotte County where she invited her mother, siblings, nieces, and nephews. All right, they had fond memories, although they were a bit traumatic at the time, included geese chasing the children all the way up to the door of the farmhouse. The farm became the gathering place for the family to remove themselves from the heart of Kansas City, and likely reminded the Richters of the simpler life once lived in Taft, Oklahoma. Sarah was quiet and private. Her easygoing nature were witnessed by her nieces in those visits to the farm. Sarah's nieces spent many summers visiting her farm in Wyandotte County and visiting a family in Taft, Oklahoma. One of Sarah's dear friends from childhood, nicknamed Big Mama, will race around the dusty landscape chasing chickens running around without heads. A few hours later, dinner of fried chicken was hot on the table. Needless to say, the children would say they weren't hungry anymore. At the highest point of her millions, Sarah Richter was said to have had an income larger than that of the President of the United States. Her oil wells at one time produced $2 per minute. She became she became a national headline, and her whole family's lives would never be the same. The matriarch of the Rector family, Mama Rose, passed away in 1957 and is buried in Blackjack Cemetery next to her husband and near generations of Negro Indian MISNOMER freedmen trailblazers that led to the unique story of the Rector legacy. Just over 10 years later, Sarah passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage on July 22nd, 1967. Ironically, her body was brought to C.K. Kirkford Funeral Home. Her last stop in Kansas City was none other than the old Rector Mansion at 2000 East 12th Street, where she and her family had once lived a life of luxury and was then operated as a mortuary. So this is Mama Rose, uh, Jeannie, Roy's wife, Mama Rose, and Rosa. All right, so Sarah's final resting place, it says, her final resting place in the ground was back where the story began, back in Taft, Oklahoma. Taft, Oklahoma was a Negro Indian town, all right? In that little peaceful parcel of land known as Blackjack Cemetery. All right, so today, there are many rumors that circulated around the Richters, and the reason for this began in the headlines that blasted across the nation and the world. The lies began then, and unfortunately, many of the lies are still circulated as being the truth. Sarah wasn't deserted by her parents. She wasn't left in the care of a white guardian. Her family loved and supported her when they lived in a small 2-room cabin on Mama Rose's allotment, and they were loved and supported, and they loved and supported her when she struck it rich. So she had family support. The family didn't leave Kansas City, Missouri, as some have reported. 5 generations of Rector descendants still call this place home. They stayed quiet as the rumors about their family recirculated every so often, as that false photo of Sarah is placed at the top of the newspaper headlines and social media posts. All right, so the drive by the abandoned Rector mansion, boarded up, falling into disrepair, wishing they could find a way to buy it back and bring it to its former glory. They cringe when someone says that's Sarah Richter's mansion because the home was all of the Richters. It wasn't just Sarah Richter's mansion. All right. And it was purchased by Sarah Richter's mother, Mama Rose, the matriarch of the family. So it is the Rector mansion. And this is where I visited today. All right. And this is a watercolor painting of the Rector mansion by Pamela Morris, 2019. It was made for the Rector descendants. All right, so just like them, I would love to see that house restored, and it needs to be a historical landmark and a museum. Okay, so they said we would like to see the house restored and have it become a historic landmark and museum. The Richter descendants told me around the kitchen table, covered with photos, records, and family papers. We have things we would like to share with everyone. The hope in having this person write this, they told the writer of this article um, to dispel so many of the wrongs that have been written over the past 100 years. They showed the writer the incorrect articles from the Smithsonian, a video of a man claiming to be a direct Rector descendant who didn't know who they didn't know. So it's some man, he put out a video saying he was their descendant. He was shamelessly asking for donations to make a documentary about his family. He was trying to do a con scheme. And he did this on a Black History website that simply got the story wrong. So they got people just trying to get money. And it goes on to say a lot of shit. This is the end of it, so I'll read the rest right here. So basically, the person who wrote this from the new Santa Fe trailer, blogspot.com, shout out to the author of this article, because they actually talked to Sarah Richter's descendants to get this information. All right, so they went to, a legit source. All right. This article was meant to rectify the Richters, to give them peace of mind that their family story is, in fact, part of history of our nation. But if it's to be told, it must be told in its entirety. This was meant to tell you about their whole family, not just Sarah. As Sarah's story is interlaced with her grandparents, her parents, and her 5 siblings. Today, it is kept alive by relentless Richter women set upon making sure their story from now on is told right. So the person that wrote this said that they are honored and humbled that they were chosen to right some of the wrongs placed upon this family's legacy and share this family's powerful place in the pages of history. The time was finally come to tell the truth. So this is the family gave them these photos. This is Sarah Richter on her farm with one of her nieces. So shout out to this website. I appreciate y'all. So these are some recommended readings for those who like book sources, book references. This is some recommended reading. Searching Sarah Richter, The Richest Negro Indian Creek Girl in America by Tanya Bolden. And they need to get this right. The Unalivers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Unalivers, and the Birth of the FBI by David Gran. This is Mama Rose in 1886 through 1957 on the farm. This is Becky and Rosa's daughters. They supplied this information to the author of this article. And then these are other descendants: Lou, Alfred, Roy, and Arthur. So shout out to the author of this article. It was good. I did like it because they got the sources from the family. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I will show this and then we will close out. And did anybody in the comment in the chat have any comments or questions? And I do have Pa and Seminole Brown in the background. They've been, watching. So I'm gonna share this and then we're gonna close out. I'm gonna bring them in for the close. All right, so I'm gonna share this one last time. This is me at the Richter Mansion. Ciel Halito, Christina, Raven Redtail Hawk Jaguar. I am at the Sunset Manor. This is the oil and land heiress, Sarah Richter of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She is the first Muskogee Creek misnomer Black millionaire. This is her manor. She purchased this when her and her family moved to Kansas City. All right. So check out the history of Sarah Richter. She is the first melanated Negro Indian Creek woman. She was a little girl when she got this land in Oklahoma. All right, a land allotment that was given to Creeks. All right, and then they throw that misnomer freedmen on there. So this is her manor here in Kansas City. This is what she purchased. It's called Sunset Manor. All right, I'm gonna show y'all. All right. I'm in the trenches. Show y'all from the side too. It was beautiful back in the day. It was beautiful back in the day. This was her brick mansion in Kansas. This is the back. It was beautiful back in the day when she bought it. All right. That sun is hitting kind of crazy. But we're going to do a walkthrough. All right. This is the other part of Sarah Richter's Sunset Manor. Shout out to Sarah Richter. And they need to restore this. Beautiful sign. They need to make this a museum. Again, this is Sunset Manor. Sarah Richter. Her brick mansion in Kansas City, Missouri. Baby. Live from Kansas City, Missouri. It's Sarah Richter, the oil and land heiress. Creek ancestry. This is her mansion. CO Halito. All right. Christina, Raven Red Tail. All right, y'all. We gonna close out. Y'all got any closing comments or questions before we close out?
I just wanted to say, man, that media was nasty, man.
Yeah, they was
straight ruthless.
yes. Yeah, they couldn't stand a Negro Indian girl being a millionaire.
Right. Straight hating.
Yeah. Yep, they was hating. Y'all
For
got
sure.
any? Go ahead. Go ahead. Somebody was speaking.
Yeah, the media is always trying to paint a negative picture, And I was listening to somebody on TikTok, and the little dude, he sounded like he had a little sugar in his tank, what I'm saying, talking about, oh, she was not a Creek Indian, she was a Freeman. But what most people don't know is that what wind up happening is they was actually taking full-blooded people who were full-blooded and making them Freemans. Freemans
Yes.
just dealing with so-called African descent. But I know this young dude, he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. You know what I'm saying? But he was
Right.
like, yeah, the Richter family them said that they're not Creeks, that they were Freemans. And I'm like, you know, like, did you really talk to them, bro? You know what I'm saying? Like, like, stop it.
Right.
Yeah. We'll call them TikTok scholars.
Yeah,
They be on some bullshit.
yeah. Eventually they do. But it's a shame that they were like, oh, she was African descent. How you know she was African descent? You
Right.
know?
Because it said that her grandfather was enslaved, but Indians were enslaved too.
Right. But see, but they always want to negate that part of the story.
Right.
Change the narrative and say, oh, there was Africans. Like the people wasn't even much called Africans at the time when slavery was going on. But hey, who am I?
Yeah, they crazy. Well, since y'all don't have no more comments or questions, we can close on out. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. So next Sunday we have Pie Up. He'll have the talking stick, and then the following Sunday, Seminole Brown will have the talking stick. So y'all stay tuned. Y'all got any last words before I press that end stream button? Seminole Brown, you got anything to say?
Peace and love, everybody.
Pie?
well, I would say that that was a good presentation that you did today. You know what I'm saying? So
Why
it
don't
was
you cookie showing a bitch cheek, huh?
people need to know that yes, she was a Creek descendant and she just was a freedman because they so-called say that she was of African descent. But once again, don't take my word for it. You had those who were actually full-blooded that who looked like Negroes was actually labeled freedmen too. Don't take my word for it. Look it up.
Yep. Research this shit. And I was gonna I'll do this maybe for my segment next month. I'll do a review of her movie. If y'all haven't seen her movie yet, Sarah's Oil, y'all go see it. I'm gonna go see it, and I'll do a review on it for my part two of this next month. So in December, when I have the talking stick, I'll do a part two and a review of that movie, and see how good they do on that movie.
But I gotta play devil's advocate, right? Because that wasn't it. There wasn't that land originally. That land belonged to the
Yeah,
to
and
the
which you always love to say that that was the Comanches' land, but this is the thing. Sarah Rector was a Creek Indian and an indigenous little girl got that land, and she got the wealth from the oil that was on that land. So the creator, great mystery, great spirit, allowed her to get that land and get that wealth. So we'll close on that note. All right, y'all. We out. Peace.
All right. Peace and love. Peace and love.